There are so many myths out there about well-being, health, and success. Sometimes we even know they're not grounded in fact, but they have a way of infiltrating our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Myths like you have to be successful in order to be happy, or your health is predetermined by your genes. Today's episode is a special compilation of Mythbusters, where I sit down with leading psychologists, behavioral experts, and well-being professionals to dispel some of the biggest myths out there around sex, addiction, relationships, health, and success. And we get into the nuance of what this all really means. Some of these you may have heard, some may surprise you, and some may be the exact permission you need to start living life on your terms. So let's dive in. Relationships come with their own set of beliefs, and social media often complicates things with unrealistic standards and misinformation. In this next segment, Dr. Morgan Anderson, relationship psychologist and attachment experts, dispels some of the biggest myths out there around avoidant attachment, hacking connection, and the idea that needing someone makes you weak.
I've noticed too on social media lately that when it comes to avoidant attachment style in particular, there's a lot of mislabeling around that and labeling behaviors that are avoidant behaviors that we would see as avoidant behaviors as narcissistic behaviors or narcissistic personality disorder. Um, I wonder if because I think that this differentiation is so important because I think people are preemptively ending relationships because they are, sort of saying, this is what's going on here. This person will never change, which we know is not the case. Can you talk a little bit about that? How what the differences are, maybe similarities and differences between some of those avoidant attachment style behaviors and narcissistic abuse or narcissistic behaviors?
I think the biggest distinction between narcissistic traits or NPD and avoidant attachment style, when it is from someone with narcissistic traits, they're doing these behaviors as a means to manipulate. The goal is to be able to get what they want and have control and, unfortunately cause harm to the other person. When it's coming from an attachment behavior or an avoidant attachment style trait, this is the desire to protect, right? The desire to pull away, to distance, to protect themselves. So absolutely, I see people labeling people as narcissists who likely have avoidant attachment style. And I think that it's really sad that people are not allowing themselves to give that person feedback. Just because somebody has maybe some avoidant attachment tendencies doesn't mean that you should just write them off. We can grow with our partners. We can have corrective emotional experiences and help people grow in relationships. So I do think it's so sad when people just go, oh, they're a narcissist. I'm done with them. And unfortunately, there's a ton of misinformation on social media that is not clearly outlining, well, hey, these are actually the requirements for someone to be a narcissist.
Most of us have been there, more invested in someone else than they are in us. It's a painful place to be. In the world of dating, you'll often come across advice or hacks on how to get someone to love you, as if love is a game that you can win. But can you actually trick someone into loving you the way that you need? Dr. Morgan shares her thoughts.
These posts going around, and it's people who are selling courses, of course, at the end of the post. And here's what they're saying. They're saying, oh, if you have a partner who has avoidant attachment, let me teach you basically the games that you need to play with this person so that you can make them love you. Like, I'll teach you what to do to get the avoidantly attached person to love you. And there was one recently, it was a man who put this post out and he was directing it towards women, and he was saying, "I'll teach you how to get the avoidantly attached man to love you." And you know what it was? It was a lot of not sharing what your needs were, trying to play the cool girl. Like,
Oh,
and this is getting
wow.
pushed out. There is content
Yeah.
that is going crazy right now, and it's
Mhm.
these poor people who are buying into, "Oh, I need to not be myself. I need to play it
Mm.
cool, and then I can get the avoidantly attached person to want me." No, it's terrible. It's infuriating.
It's infuriating, and as you said, it's just incredibly sad because now you're creating another layer of problems for that person who will
Yeah.
now never get their needs met if they're not communicating their needs. Like, we know that these stuff is the basis of a healthy relationship, and when you're trying to, take aside obviously the game part is just like, "Oh, can we please stop playing the games?" But when you are trying to get people to change their behaviors to address a problem that actually creates a new problem, it just makes 0 sense, doesn't it? Like, you know,
Ugh.
how are we supposed to have secure attachment relationships if we aren't expressing our needs?
Absolutely. And I think this idea that, "Oh, we can get this person to choose us," that's been so unhealthy for so many people their entire lives, and
Mhm.
it's usually rooted in childhood trauma and, you know, repetition compulsion. So, a lot of us have childhood unfinished business from our relationships, right? And we have these attachment wounds that have roots in childhood. And for example, if you had the emotionally unavailable father, and for so long you just wanted to have your father's love and attention, but you never got that outcome, we know that you're likely to seek out partners who create that same dynamic for you in adulthood. And unconsciously, you're seeking out those partners to recreate the same dynamics from childhood, and you are wanting a different outcome. So you're wanting the unavailable person to choose you, to love you, right? So this it's such a harmful narrative if we're telling people, "Oh, you just have to be a certain way or, show up a certain way and then you can get this person to
Mhm.
love you." Because there's so many of us that are engaging in repetition compulsion and we're not even aware of it.
And it absolutely reinforces those behaviors, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And you and I know that, okay, let's say you do have some anxious attachment tendencies and you find yourself in a relationship with someone with some avoidant attachment tendencies. You can absolutely invite that person to learn how to show up more secure. And you can directly communicate to them and say, "Hey, these are the things that I need. This is how I'm being impacted by your behavior." And guess what? They may become more secure with you. But the solution is not for you to self abandon and to not express your needs and to play the games. And anybody that's telling you to do that, to abandon who you really are and what your needs are, um, they don't have your best interest at heart.
A lot of misconceptions out there around the idea that if you have needs, if you need your partner in some way, that that is unhealthy, and we know that that's obviously not the case. In fact, it's the opposite of, what is a healthy relationship.
It's about knowing yourself and learning how to trust yourself. And I'll go back to knowing how to also regulate your own emotions and calm your
Yeah.
own nervous system so that when you are going to your partner, you can show up and ask for your needs to be met, hopefully in a securely attached way, and
Mhm.
then your partner can hear you. I think we get into trouble when we don't have that self-trust and we can't
Mhm.
depend on ourselves.
Let's talk about intimacy and desire and the misinformation that surrounds us. In these next clips, Dr. Lisa Thomas-Emrus, sexologist and lifestyle practitioner, breaks down some of the myths that harm our relationship and our sense of self, especially when it comes to sexual desire.
all men want sex all the time with anyone. And that's a really negative messaging in itself, because it means that then if men don't want to have sex, they feel like there's something wrong with them. It also builds into that messaging of mistrust between partners as well. If they think, oh, well, my partner is just going to want to have sex with anyone and everyone who's walking past them. And like all women through the perimenopause and the menopause don't want sex, that's not actually true. And actually, lots of women will have a really good sex life in the menopause and after the menopause. So it's not, oh, well, you're done. As soon as your fertility stops, that's it. Then sex is not for you anymore. In actual fact, I have lots of women who go through the menopause, and when the symptoms are well controlled, or if they don't have symptoms, actually, they feel totally free to enjoy their sex life as much as they want, because now sex isn't connected to fertility and that concept of being a mother. So now actually they can really own it just for their own pleasure.
Another big one is around orgasm and penetration.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, and again, that is like porn contributing to that, because, porn stars seem to show that they have orgasms with penetration, and same with movies, I guess. So it doesn't even have to be porn. How many even mainstream movies or TV shows where the female character is orgasming just through penetration and has no vulval or clitoral stimulation. Pretty much most, non-erotic films or non-intimate films, they don't actually show any vulval or clitoral stimulation, do they? Because that would be like, too explicit. So actually, that again is messaging that we get throughout our ages, particularly when women don't watch as much porn. So all they'll ever see of other people having sex is through a woman having vaginal penetration and that ending up with an orgasm. And actually, the vast majority of women can't have an orgasm that way. Often you can train yourself to do that if that is an absolute goal that you have, but it certainly doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. And actually, the vast majority of women will only reach orgasm if they are using vulval and clitoral stimulation at the same time as penetration.
What are some of the myths that you've encountered on social media about sexual desire?
Oh, oh God, there's so much, odd stuff that you come across on social media, particularly if like me, you Googled a few dodgy things, and then your phone obviously thinks, oh, this person's really into this. I'm gonna start exposing it to weird and wonderful Instagram accounts, etc. But I think like common things are, if you need lubricants, that means that you're not turned on. That means that it's not working, or you're not attracted to your partner. So that's a common one that I come across. And, lots of the patients I've seen over the years, when I tried to introduce lubricants, they've gone, oh, well, my partner is going to think that, I'm not turned on and I'm not attracted to them anymore. And it's going to show that my body doesn't work. And that's an absolute myth. Lubricants are pretty much essential for most people, I would say, and it definitely helps enhance it. You just need a good quality lubricant. So that's my point on lubricants before I start ranting about lubricants.
We're taught to chase success, believing that happiness will follow. But what happens if we've got that all backwards? Dr. Maike Neuhaus talks us through why starting with happiness, not hustle, is the key to success. What are some of the myths that you've encountered that you can dispel for us?
One of the biggest ones, I guess, is that success comes first and then follows happiness. I'll be happy when.
That is huge. Like that idea of I'll be happy when. I hear that so often. And then also, I'm sure you've experienced on the other side of that when people are at that when, and then the happiness doesn't come.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, miswanting is one thing, right? But also, so we know that this goes both ways. So we know that when we're happy, or when we're in the positively, regulated emotional state, we actually, our brains function a lot better, right? You could say that's like the
opposite to the fight or flight response, right? When we're relaxed and we actually feel good and regulated, we can use the full spectrum of our brain's capacity. So, we will have good decision making, we will be more innovative, more creative, we will be more productive. We deal better with when we're client facing, so we can build better relationships with other people. So there's so much research in that area. It's called the broaden and build theory by Barbara Fredrickson, that shows that it kind of goes the other way around. When we're happy, we actually perform better. So, but when then we look at research overall, we just know that this is bidirectional. This relationship is just bidirectional. Of course, we are also happy when we're successful and we get that job or the promotion or our project works out well or whatever. Of course, we're happy then too. But it's important to acknowledge that it goes both ways.
That is such an important point and something I have personally focused on a lot. I think, one of the things I love about being a psychologist is I think it forced me to really take care of myself, to be able to be really present in sessions. And so I'm huge on, self-care and taking care of yourself first. And I think that that's, if someone is feeling a little bit lost, it's a really good starting point is just to say it's okay if you don't have it all figured out. Just do the things that make you feel good now, and that can kind of help you to get to where you want to go. And if you're not achieving, that's okay. Maybe that's just an indicator that you need to come back and focus on your well-being, focus on your happiness for a little bit. Because as you said, we do know it's all connected, and just things like creativity, our productivity, are all increased when we're more present, we're more mindful, we're in a better state of mind. So sometimes, flipping that script a little bit and focusing in on taking care of yourself will lead to the success maybe that you're looking for. Our social media feeds are flooded with wellness advice. We're told to buy the latest best-selling book, optimize our morning routines, do a cold plunge, jump in a hot sauna, do yoga, meditate, but only if it optimizes our productivity. It's like being healthy has become a performance, another checkbox, another thing that we have to get right. Have we confused performance with health and forgotten that the most healing thing sometimes is simply slowing down?
So often we think, well-being and more well-being is about more and more, having more, doing more, achieving more. That's again our society, isn't it? But so often well-being is about subtracting rather than adding. And it's just that when we subtract, often we have nothing to show to our Instagram feed. So, but you got to make a choice.
You know what? That just really resonates with me. I had a thought the other day because I was, in that, Instagram kind of thing, just doing Instagram stuff for work. And I was thinking, I'm in this weird space where I feel like the more I see other people succeed and take on, the less I want to do because I just want to stay really present. And I think, we're talking before about coming back from Bali and for me trying to maintain some of those changes that I've made and not get caught in the kind of hustle culture and the do and the go is just, really keeping life a little bit simple still. And I think, yeah, I was just looking at, actually, it might have been even LinkedIn that I was on, and just had that thought of like, as you said, people are showcasing the 20 different projects they're juggling. And I was just thinking, I just never want to get back to that place. Like, I just want to maintain focus on the things that bring me pleasure, that I'm enjoying doing in the work, and just let go of all the rest.
I am so hearing you. A few years we moved to the south of France and things sort of happened differently to how we'd planned them. I was planning on settling the kids into school, and once they were settled, I would go and work. Um, and I was so excited about that because in Europe, my qualifications count differently than they do in Australia. And I could actually work as an organizational psychologist again, which I used to in Germany, but was never allowed in Australia. Anyway, and it all came completely different because we spontaneously decided to homeschool the kids, which was obviously then my job. So I didn't work. And our lives, because all of a sudden there was no school and there was only one of us parents working full time, our lives became so simple. So much fell away in terms of preparing, commuting, all these activities, and the more simple our life became, the better it became. And that is something that will stick with me forever. And I'm also trying to preserve. And I think, though, because before that, we were very much part of the hustle culture too, and full-time jobs, very demanding, traveling a lot for work, both parents. So when you weren't traveling for work, you were single parenting and the kids and all the activities on weekends and afternoons. And I don't know, far out. It's like, I just want to scream from the top of my lungs, guys, just chill out, everyone. It is better when you do less. So, but it's hard to protect that, isn't it? When you live in a society where everyone just runs like a hamster for their lives in the hamster wheels. But yeah, wholeheartedly agree. The simpler, the better.
Change is hard, but what if we've been going about it the wrong way? In this next clip, behavioral analyst Chelsea Troutman shares why punishment does not facilitate change and why nervous system safety is so important, particularly in our relationships and in the workplace.
I have seen a general shift in a lot of the narrative on social media, and people are moving away from punishment. And that's in a public forum. However, you do see time and time again that people's default response is punishment procedures. And I would say there's a time and place, particularly when you're talking about safety here. Punishment is necessary, or you're talking about due process. It is necessary. But when we're talking about behavior change, punishment does not teach new behaviors. So it is really important to think the best way to teach new behaviors is someone being able to learn. So again, you're managing the arousal, not managing the behavior. You can never teach someone to swim when they're drowning. In that instance, save them. Breathe with them, be present, co-regulate, or take space because you guys have recognized that's what's really important. Manage arousal first, and then create the capacity to learn and change your behavior.
Next, Dr. Charlotte Ord, psychologist and eating disorder specialist, reminds us why appearance and food myths impact our self-esteem and why shifting these beliefs needs to start in childhood. What are some of the myths that you've encountered in social media when it comes to body image or body satisfaction?
I think one, a favorite of diet culture and fitness culture is that to be happy and content in your body, you need to look a certain way, or that is the answer to body confidence. I think that's completely the opposite, actually, of healthy body image. The sense that you have to fit a certain body type or shape or weight in order to feel okay in yourself. So that's the first thing. Body confidence comes from within, it really does. And accepting your natural body as it is. Because when we truly accept our bodies as they are and respect them, then, we tend to take better care of the things that we like. And so that supports, that will support your health way more than trying to shoehorn it into a certain way of being that isn't necessarily designed for you, that's not right for you. This idea that there's a right way to eat, there is not a right way to eat because every body is different. Every metabolism is different. Every person's energy requirements is different. Everyone exercises in a different way. Everyone has different food preferences. There's just so much variability. And, some people are vegetarian, some people are vegan, some people, are meat eaters. And there's just so much variability. And so many different ways of eating in a healthy way. And I truly believe that all foods can be incorporated into a healthy diet. But what diet culture has really trained us to do is to stop listening to our own body wisdom and intuition about what we need in the way that babies do. But we're all born with this very innate knowing for what we need and when to stop. But that is sort of trained out of us because we're surrounded by all these external messaging or ideas around what we should be eating or what's right for us, that we start to suppress our own needs and stop listening to our bodies and our own internal cues and start looking externally to what we need. And that's where it all goes horribly wrong, I think. Which is why for kids, and this I think is a really challenging area for parents particularly, it's so important to give them as wide a variety of food as you possibly can.
And of course, that will depend on your socioeconomic status and all, food availability and all that sort of thing. But to trust your child to to say which parts they want and how much. It's a tricky one, especially when there's just so much talk about good foods and bad foods and moralizing of foods. But if you are able to do that, then you really set your kid up to have a great relationship with food, because they will keep their own intuition for what their body really needs intact.
Addiction is one of the most misunderstood areas of mental health. In these next two clips, Dr. Jaffe, addiction expert, takes on two of the biggest myths around addiction: that you are born with an addictive personality, and once an addict, always an addict. He also shares why some people need abstinence and other people may need a different path.
People talk about having an addictive personality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To be really clear, scientifically, in terms of research, there is no such thing as a addictive personality. You may be impulsive, right? And if you're impulsive, you may do things other people won't do. So like when I picked up that, I'm pretty impulsive generally. So like when I picked up that jug of vodka, that was a relatively impulsive decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can be an impulsive person. You can be a risk taker, willing to take risks that other people don't. You can, there's something called, there seem to be personalities that account for more or less risk, like they're more risk averse or less risk averse. You put a lot of those things in place, and yes, people end up struggling with addiction more often than not. But the reason I think they're important is if you don't understand why it happened, you attribute it to the addiction. Whereas if you say to yourself, oh, I'm an impulsive person, it's not about the addiction. It's, wait, I don't think oftentimes before I take action. My brain is quick, so I act before I have time to process sometimes. Now the coping strategy is, okay, I'm going to take a 5-second rule. Every time somebody asks me a question, I'm going to pause. I'm going to think for 5 seconds, and then I'm going to move, right? Like, do you understand? Like, dealing with...
Absolutely, yeah. It's so much of it's what your book is all about, really.
Yeah.
It's getting to the root cause, understanding those hooks, understanding the way you respond to them. Because if we don't understand that and we just put it in this global terminology of addiction and how we address that, that's not actually understanding who we are, what our hooks are, how we respond to things. So, sustainable change is not possible until we have that understanding.
And then addiction just becomes this like throwaway label. It doesn't actually mean anything in the end, because
No, it doesn't.
it holds so much that it becomes meaningless. That people have to be ready to quit in order to get help, I think that's BS. That is not true. And last but not least, although I think this goes along with once an addict, always an addict, there's this notion that once you find yourself struggling with one addiction, you have to stay away from anything that has addictive potential for the rest of your life. Right. So like if you had an alcohol problem, you can't smoke weed ever. By the way, if you had an alcohol problem, you can't drink alcohol ever again. If you had a heroin problem, you can't drink alcohol. Like there are a lot of these,
Yeah.
And the reason it happens, by the way, if you go back to the beginning, a lot of people who struggle with addiction do play whack-a-mole in terms of which addiction they struggle with at what point in time, but it's because they've never addressed the underlying issues, right? So you call it out, and this is probably the most controversial. I don't know if I made controversial statements at this point as a podcast, but I probably rubbed some people the wrong way, but it's okay. This one is actually the hardest one for a lot of people to think of. So I used to be addicted to meth, but I used a ton of drugs. Like meth was just the one I liked the best, but LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, back in the days that it was ecstasy. I don't like cocaine, but meth, pills, GHB, ketamine, alcohol here and there. Weed makes me anxious, so I didn't use a lot of that, but a lot of different drugs, right? Was sober for 3 years. I'm not sober anymore. I haven't been sober since 2005. So it's been 20 years that I haven't been sober. I think you can have an addiction problem, address it, and then not be sober and still be fine. To be clear, as I say that, because a lot of people hear that and they run for the fences or they send me threatening messages that I'm... Well, first of all, we're failing 99% of people, so there's nothing I can do that would make things worse, almost. But here's what I want to be clear about. If you engage in any behavior that even has the potential to be addictive. So we're talking about eating sugar, eating fatty foods, gambling, watching porn, engaging in sex, obviously any substance use, right? Because all those things have, using technology, all those things have the potential to be. So if you do any of those things and you don't want to end up using them compulsively for coping, you have to be committed to this lifelong journey of self-learning and understanding and change. That's the key.
That is such an important point. I love that you use those other examples of addiction because it's so true. And, another one being work or scrolling
Oh
through
my God,
social
yeah, I use that
media.
in the book too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So
Work
the
is a huge one.
reality is we can't eliminate those things completely from our
No,
lives. It's just not realistic. But
no.
it is about how we use them. Are we using those things as a way of coping? Taking work, for example, work can obviously be a fantastic thing. It brings us income, it brings us joy, it brings us purpose. But if we're using work as an escape from our problems, then it's problematic. But that doesn't mean we need to stop working. It means that we need to understand why we're using work as a way of coping and address that root cause, as you're saying.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm probably relatively guilty of replacing my addictions to drugs to my work, by the way, right? That's probably one of the places I've gone to. And I used to work 75, 80, 85-hour weeks regularly. That was how I functioned,
Yeah.
and it almost destroyed my family. And so I had to figure out how to moderate that, right? And I pretty much don't work after 5 or 6 p.m., which used to be not true. I pretty much don't work on the weekend, which used to be not true. But I share my examples because I love that you went to work. That's literally one of the examples I use in the book. But we cannot eliminate addictive potential and addictive behaviors and substances from our lives. It will not happen. If that's the goal, we're going to fail at it. So what we have to do is we have to resource ourselves and empower ourselves to know how to handle when we slip up, when we over-rely on a coping strategy. It's going to happen, right? You're going to eat a half a tub of ice cream one day because you feel so crappy. If you say to yourself, oh my God, I'm going to go back to overeating and compulsively eating every day because that's what I did in college because I'm addicted to food, that's a whole different avenue than if you say, oh, wait, I haven't done this in 3 years. I just ate half a gallon of ice cream. Something is going on. I need to go look, right? Same exact experience, same exact past, two completely different future paths. And I think that's the once an addict, always an addict. That's where it screws us is the explanation we have is, oh, the reason I'm eating half a gallon is because I'm an addict.
There's no single truth when it comes to healing, growing, and being a human. What today's Mythbusters showed us is that the greatest change can come about when we start to challenge the things that we thought we had to accept. The thing I love most about these conversations is not just dispelling the information. It's about recognizing that there is rarely one simple truth. There's nuance to everything. And the most important thing when taking in any information, including what we talk about in this podcast, is to consider it in the context of your life. What are your values? What does your ideal life look like? And how do you want to live life every day? Because that, my friend, is what this podcast is all about. If something you heard today shifted your perspective, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And as I prepare for season 2, we have some incredible guests coming, and I would like to know, are there any questions you want answered, misinformation you've encountered, or topics that you'd like to see covered? Drop a note in the comments, and if you want more real-life, evidence-based information, hit the subscribe button now. Until next time, keep questioning the noise and keep coming back to what's true for you as you build a life that feels good from the inside out.